Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. So good to be with you this early hour on Monday, August 4th, here on the East Coast. For those of you who are joining us from our 24/7 live stream, Launchpad Live, you've undoubtedly been watching the light show that's been happening around Florida's Space Coast as thunderstorms roll across the area, now largely offshore. Hopefully, we'll be out of the path of the Falcon 9 rocket that SpaceX needs to take with this mission. Multiple shifts in the T0 due to the poor weather around Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. SpaceX is currently counting down to a T0 liftoff at 3:44 a.m. Eastern. That is 7:44 UTC for those around the world. Taking a look at our live chat here, I want to thank the little more than 500 of you who are watching along with us live at this odd hour of the morning here on the East Coast. So really appreciate you all being here at this point. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream, allowing some folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. I want to thank our moderator, Jeff Hansen, in the live chat for helping us out this morning. And if you do see any of the other mods cruise on in while we roll on through the countdown, be sure to give them a big old Spaceflight Now hello. Channel member Cumulus Granatus is also in the chat to help answer folks' questions as we roll on through the countdown. You can help our moderators in their job by following the rules of the live chat. We ask that you converse in English so that the mods can respond as appropriate, that you refrain from delving into overt politics or religion, and hold off on using all caps when you type. And most importantly, be sure to treat each other with the same kindness and respect that you yourself would like to be treated. As we're getting going here, our Spaceflight Now editor Stephen Young and John Pisani are running the technical operations of the broadcast today. Adam Bernstein out and about manning the tracking cameras as well as the other cameras pointed at the pad right now, which has been quite the challenge given the thunderstorms today. So, doing quite the workout and making sure all of them are protected as the storms rolled through. If you're not following our photographer team on X, you can find them at their handles that you see here on your screen. Adam is at ABurnNYC. John is at John Pisani Photo. Michael Kane is at MD Kane Jr. And be sure to follow Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. You can also find us on Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook. Assuming all goes well for the duration of the countdown, we'll be joined with tracking assistance by our friends Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions. Also got our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs along for the ride at this point from C&J Images. Taking a look at Chuck and Jen's camera view from Merritt Island right now. As we roll closer to T0 liftoff, I want to thank our wonderful channel member community here on YouTube for making this launch coverage possible. So thanks to folks like Ryan Snyder, the Roddy Mom, Mark Pachotnik, M. Teresa, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Last little bit of housekeeping. If you have a comment or question about this mission or would otherwise like to just offer some support tonight slash this morning, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature, as Jeff Hansen just did. And not only will he be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the count, but you'll also be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now. And that, my friends, is always greatly appreciated. Thanks to channel member and moderator Rick Donner for $10 super chat. Thank you, Rick. Says, thanks to our supporters for making these streams possible. And to another moderator, Jeff Hansen, for also a $10 super chat, who says, go Cape, go SpaceX, go Falcon 9, go Starlink, Godspeed 1080. 1080 is the tail number for the booster that is flying today's Starlink mission, sending another 28 of the V2 mini variety of Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit. It will be launching for its 21st time today. According to our records, this will also be SpaceX's 450th flight of a flight-proven booster. Want to welcome in new channel member David Humphreys as well, joining with membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard, David. We're glad to have you with us. I also want to thank David and Rick Donner for each gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. So to our 10 newest gifted members, welcome aboard to all of you. We're glad to have you with us. And be sure to thank David and Rick in the live chat if you haven't already. And we sure hope you decide to stick around with channel membership beyond the month you were just gifted. Time now T minus 47 minutes, 24 seconds and counting. At this point, SpaceX is just about 10 minutes away from when they will nominally make the call on the start of propellant load. As we're approaching that milestone, let's go ahead and take a beat to talk about the countdown timeline. The series of milestones that SpaceX will check off as they progress towards a good liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket, hopefully weather permitting, in just about 46 minutes and 41 seconds. As things start to calm down, the Phase 2 Lightning Watch has been allowed to expire for most areas of Cape Canaveral Space Force Station and the Kennedy Space Center, with the exception of Pad 40. So hopefully that will resolve in time for SpaceX to move forward with the launch attempt today. As far as the countdown is concerned, generally speaking, the poll regarding the start of prop load is conducted at T minus 38 minutes. SpaceX does this poll electronically, so if it feels like it's in a good position to do so, can begin this early. Once the go-ahead for fueling is given, that'll start at T minus 35 minutes. The loading of RP-1, a rocket-grade kerosene on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. At the same time, liquid oxygen will begin flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. T minus 30 minutes is when SpaceX starts to load a cryogenic helium on board the pressure vessels, the Falcon 9's first stage. Same is true on the second stage, a few minutes after that. And that helium, of course, is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. T minus 23 minutes, the second stage RP-1 tank should be full. Then at T minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill down process begins. SpaceX at this point in the countdown is thermally conditioning the feed lines at the pad ahead of loading liquid oxygen aboard the rocket's second stage. We'll see this visually manifest as the big vent at about T minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds here at pad 40. That vent lasts about 4 minutes in duration, setting up for second stage LOX load to begin at the 16-minute mark. At 7 minutes out, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines will begin. That's when SpaceX flows a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps. That helps to protect those engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank is full. T minus 4.5 minutes is when the strong back retraction sequence begins. This starts with the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector, or the strong back, will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket, and it stays in that position until liftoff. Then at that point, it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9 rocket. 3 minutes before flight, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true on the second stage about a minute afterwards. And at that point, the Falcon 9 will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch command T minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition command is issued at T minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite as expected, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. Once again, currently targeting 3:44 a.m. Eastern, 7:44 UTC, or T minus 42 minutes and 18 seconds. Time now T minus 40 minutes, 13 seconds and counting. As we're just a couple minutes away from the SpaceX launch director making the call on the start of prop load today. Some good weather trending. The phase two lightning warning has been lifted now for all areas of the Space Coast. A phase one lightning watch remains in effect, but as we've seen with previous launches, that in and of itself would not prevent SpaceX from launching potentially. And SpaceX is shifting now to the very last opportunity within the window today, looking at 3:57 a.m. Eastern, 07:57 UTC. As you can see, we've reset our countdown clock to reflect that because of the way that SpaceX fuels its Falcon 9 rocket using a super cold densified liquid oxygen that requires the launch provider to fuel its rocket up to nearly the point at which it's preparing to launch a load and go style of fueling, as it's known. So as long as they have not begun fueling their rocket, they still have latitude to adjust the T0, as we've just now seen. And this is the last opportunity that they have in today's launch window. So if the weather is not fully permissible to allow for a launch today, they would need to stand down and target a backup opportunity that would pick up in the overnight hours of Monday into Tuesday. We've talked broadly about the weather. Let's go ahead and talk about it more explicitly. The 45th Weather Squadron forecasts an 85% chance for favorable weather coming into tonight's launch opportunity. That broadcast was, or excuse me, that forecast was, well, you could say the forecast was broadcast to all of us when they published it, citing concerns for interference from cumulus clouds and anvil clouds noting that there were isolated thunderstorms and showers that were rolling on in the late afternoon, early evening, and that could amplify overnight. And we certainly see that being the case. Time now T minus 47 minutes, 50 seconds. If you're just joining us, SpaceX is now targeting the end of its launch window today for a hopeful liftoff of the Starlink 10-30 mission, sending a batch of 28 Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit, currently nestled inside the payload fairings of the Falcon 9 rocket you see there live on your screen, standing tall at Space Launch Complex 40 there at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. A launch today would represent the 513th Falcon 9 rocket launch to date and the 96th launch of the year so far. That second number notable since it's the total number of launches that SpaceX achieved in all of 2023. The Falcon booster that is launching today's mission B-1080 flying for a 21st time. Once upon a time, that would have earned it a spot in the Falcon Booster Frequent Flyer Club, but times being what they are, That is no longer the case. Here are those top contenders right now, with B-1067 continuing to lead the pack with 29 completed flights to date, followed by B-1071, now with 27 flights. Couple ties there with 63 and 69 with 26 launches apiece, and 77 and 78 having flown now 22 times each. SpaceX is working to certify its first stage boosters for up to 40 flights apiece alongside the payload fairings. Here's where the company stands as far as their total number of Falcon flights on the year so far as compared to years past. Of course, the most recent flight was the launch of the Crew 11 mission to the International Space Station on board Crew Dragon Endeavour. Safely docked to the orbiting outpost, the crew is in the midst of a multi-day handover with the Crew 10 quartet, who will soon depart from the International Space Station and target a splashdown off the coast of California. For those of you who've been out of the loop of the Falcon program for a minute, SpaceX has now shifted all of its Dragon recovery operations from the East Coast now to the West Coast. This was done in order to protect better against the Dragon trunk from making its way through the atmosphere and splashing or landing on land, as we've seen a number of times with previous trunks. The separation sequence would now more likely allow the trunk to enter over uninhabited parts of the Pacific Ocean and splash down in a way that is the least potentially threatening to loss of life or property. "43 minutes, 43 seconds ahead of the last opportunity for SpaceX to launch this Falcon 9 rocket on this morning of August 4th. They do have another backup window that would open up tomorrow at a similar time. Just under 42 and a half minutes to go before the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. Within the next few minutes, the SpaceX launch director is expected to make a call on the start of propellant load for today's chance at launching this Falcon 9. As we're awaiting that milestone, let's go ahead and take a moment to talk about the payload that's hopefully going to be flying today. 28 Starlink V2 Mini optimized satellites are on board this Falcon 9 rocket. This represents the 69th Starlink launch of the year so far. Among those, there have been 67 dedicated Starlink missions. Starlink 13-1 earlier in the year carried a couple of Starshield satellites, and while not definitive at this point, it does appear as though the Starlink 13-4 mission that we saw just recently also carried a couple of Starshield satellites, which are the government variant of Starlink. Friend of the channel and expert orbital tracker and astronomer Jonathan McDowell suggested as much that it certainly could be the case. That there was a gap in some of the reported objects that are currently being tracked, which would suggest that there were a couple of those Starshield sats nestled on top of the Starlink satellites launched on the Starlink 13-4 mission, which carried a reported 19 Starlink satellites. Even for a launch from Vandenberg, that is the lightest or the fewest number of Starlink satellites launched in some time from the West Coast. As you can see from the weight difference, the optimized version of the Starlink satellites are considerably lighter than the previous Starlink version 2 minis. With their solar panels unfurled, they have a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. They use argon Hall effect thrusters for in-orbit maneuvering. Built up in Redmond, Washington, they'll be deployed at about 172 miles or 277 kilometers in altitude at a 53-degree inclination. 39 and a half minutes to go, and just a couple minutes remaining before we should know whether or not SpaceX is in fact going to be fueling its Falcon 9 rocket. And that'll tell us what we need to know about whether or not this launch is moving forward today. Now under 38 minutes. At this point, the poll has been conducted or is just wrapping up. We'll see whether or not that resulted in SpaceX giving the go-ahead for the start of fueling for its Falcon 9 rocket. If that go-ahead was in fact given, then tanking of this vehicle set to begin at the T-minus 35-minute mark with the loading of RP-1, that rocket-grade kerosene, and liquid oxygen. LOX will flow on board the first stage of the rocket. Now T minus 34 minutes, 36 seconds and counting. Less than 35 minutes to go, which means if SpaceX did in fact give the go-ahead for the start of prop load, fueling of its Falcon 9 rocket is now underway. We will, of course, be looking closely for signs of fueling, as SpaceX typically doesn't post notice of the start of fueling. The one silver lining of all of the thunderstorms that have been rolling through the area is that there are considerably fewer heat waves in between our camera and the Falcon 9. You can very clearly make out the lettering of SpaceX. Well, from a heat wave perspective, that is still quite a bit of soot on that rocket, given that it has flown 20 times before. What we're watching for, though, is just beneath the X in SpaceX. You see that white band that runs across the rocket. It's at that point where we'll start to see a frost line form and a little bit of vapor in that pocket of the rocket, as well as liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the rocket's first stage. If that's the case, that'll be a good visual indication that SpaceX is in fact fueling its Falcon 9 rocket and will be making an attempt at launching at the end of the window today. And we are, in fact, starting to see some vapor form near the base of the rocket, which means SpaceX is fueling its launch vehicle and is going to give it the old college try. We'll see if the weather cooperates, but SpaceX is at least going to make a run at it. Time now T minus 31 minutes, 43 seconds and counting. Time now T minus 30 minutes and counting. If you're just now joining us, SpaceX is in fact fueling its Falcon 9 rocket at Space Launch Complex 40 in anticipation of launching the Starlink 10-30 mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Rocket will be heading in a northeasterly trajectory once it leaves the pad to start sending those 28 Starlink V2 mini satellites on their way into low Earth orbit. So we've got a little more than 770 of you watching along with us live. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream. Lots more folks who are either early birds or night owls out there to join us in this live launch coverage. At this point in the countdown as well, SpaceX is loading that cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels on the Falcon 9's first stage. Same will happen on the second stage in the next few minutes. That process, of course, important because helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. The Falcon first stage booster that is launching today's mission has the tail number 1080 in the SpaceX fleet. Having flown now 20 times before, looking for its 21st flight in less than 28 minutes. Let's go ahead and take a spell and talk about the flight history for this particular first stage booster, where it's been, before we get to see where it is heading. Its first flight was a crewed mission up to the International Space Station, Axiom Mission 2, which launched on May 21st of 2023. Former NASA astronaut, current Axiom Space astronaut Peggy Whitson led that four-person mission to the orbiting outpost, flying on board the Dragon named Freedom. That was followed on July 1st of that year by the launch of the European Space Agency observatory called Euclid. Next up, a couple launches for the Starlink constellation. It's Starlink 6-11 on August 27th and 6-24 on October 22nd. That was followed up by another Dragon flight for Axiom Space, Axiom 3, led by another former NASA astronaut, current chief astronaut over at Axiom, Michael Lopez Alegria. One more Dragon launched by this booster. That was the Commercial Resupply Services, or CRS-30 mission, which launched from Slick 40, the first second-generation Dragon spacecraft to do so. That was on March 21st of 2024, with a touchdown at Landing Zone 1, which now for SpaceX is officially retired. A couple more Starlinks came after that. We had Starlink 6-50 on April 18th and 6-62 on May 23rd. That was followed up by the Astra 1P/SES-24 satellite on June 20th of last year. Then another cargo mission to the International Space Station, this time a Cygnus spacecraft from Northrop Grumman, the NG-21 mission, which lifted off on August 4th. NG-22 was supposed to fly earlier this year, but was damaged before it was able to be readied fully for flight. So that was taken out of rotation. Some shuffling had to occur with the schedule of cargo up to the International Space Station. CRS-33 is the next cargo flight that will head up to the ISS. That'll be followed a little bit later on by the launch of the NG-23 mission. And that Cygnus spacecraft is now safely in Florida. It's the first extended Cygnus spacecraft that is set to fly. we'll obviously talk more about that as we get closer to that launch. Back to Starlinks we go for this booster from here to the present. We had Starlink 10-10 on October 15th, 6-69 on November 11th, 12-1 on November 25th, 12-2 on December 23rd, 12-4 on January 13th of this year, 10-2 on February 18th, 6-80 on March 31st, 6-75 on May 2nd, 10-32 on May 28th, and most recently we had Starlink 10-16 on June 25th, which of course paves the way for Starlink 10-30 to launch coming up here in just shy of 24 minutes from now. 23 minutes on the clock. We are coming up to the point where SpaceX will start to condition the feed lines at the pad prior to second stage liquid oxygen load. And we see the big vent, which will begin at about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. Before that, though, let's go ahead and talk about the launch timeline, the nominal sequence of events for a good flight of the Falcon 9 rocket. Of course, beginning with a liftoff from Space Launch Complex 40 at 3:57 a.m. Eastern, 07:57 UTC. That'll be followed by the rocket passing through max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. After that, it will throttle up on the 9 Merlin engines and begin to thermally condition the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage ahead of its first burn. We'll see a few events in fairly rapid succession, starting with MECO, first stage main engine cutoff, at about T plus 2 minutes and 25 seconds, followed by stage separation, and then the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine about 10 seconds after MECO. The payload fairings will be jettisoned just before the 3-minute mark. A few minutes after that is when the entry burn will begin. Lasting less than 30 seconds, SpaceX will fire up 3 of the 9 engines at the base of the booster to begin to slow that part of the vehicle down dramatically. That will set up for the start of the landing burn to begin just before the 8-minute mark. SpaceX will target a touchdown on the drone ship called Just Read the Instructions, with a landing a little before 8.5 minutes has elapsed in the mission. The Merlin vacuum engine will complete its first burn about 10 seconds after the drone ship landing. The upper stage will then continue on in a coast phase until T plus 54 minutes and 49 seconds, when there will be a brief 2-second burn to help circularize the orbit of that upper stage and allow the Starlink satellites to be released at about T plus 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 11 seconds. And we're just about 10 seconds away now from the start of the big vent. And there's the start of the big vent right on time as SpaceX conditions those feed lines. The company's still progressing towards a good liftoff at 3:57 a.m. Eastern, 07:57 UTC. Just under 16.5 minutes to go. And you can see the big vent is tapering off. Second stage liquid oxygen load is now getting underway. Just under 15 minutes to go until the planned liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket from Space Launch Complex 40. Want to thank the little more than 1,000 of you who are watching along with us live. If you haven't already, now's a great time to hit that like button, share the stream, allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Also, good time to talk about SpaceX's workhorse vehicle, the Falcon 9 rocket, of course. Stands 70 meters or 229 feet in height, the diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Majority of that, of course, made up by the rocket's first stage. The booster of the vehicle is powered by, of course, those 9 Merlin engines, which produces 1.7 million pounds of thrust, burning rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen. For those who weren't with us earlier in the broadcast, this is B-1080, which will be making its 21st trip to space and back today. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs that are used to land the first stage on the drone ship. SpaceX is using the ship called Just Read the Instructions for this launch. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. In that image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere. Tail first like a big old dart heading towards that drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the vehicle's second stage. And at first stage main engine cutoff, high pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Also, the second stage engine nozzle is housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until the point of stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket is powered by a single modified Merlin engine referred to as a Merlin vacuum engine or an MVac engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle which is optimized for burns to the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust, and it'll be fired twice on today's flight to place the 28 Starlink V2 mini optimized satellites into their intended orbit. Like with the first stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 burns the same propellant mix of RP-1 and LOX. Following the deployment of the Starlink satellites, there will be one final burn of that upper stage engine, which will deorbit it, drive it back into the atmosphere where it's designed to burn up and help eliminate the risk of space debris on this mission. Finally, at the top of the Falcon 9 stack are the payload fairings currently encapsulating the Starlink satellites. The fairings are made up of a carbon composite material and stand 13.1 meters or 43 feet in height and are 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. Following fairing jettison, these two halves will be recovered by one of SpaceX's recovery vessels, brought back through Port Canaveral, turned over to the Hangar X site, and then refurbished and turned around for future missions. Just under 9.5 minutes remaining in the countdown. Coming up next will be the chill of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon booster. SpaceX will flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect those engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. Taking a look at our live chat, want to thank Brian Beelman for a very generous $50 super chat. Really appreciate that support, Brian. Thank you so much for chipping in and helping us out tonight, especially at that level. And thank you to the now more than 1,200 of you who are watching with us live. Really appreciate you just being here at this odd hour here on the East Coast. Perhaps a better hour for those in other parts of the world. Just under 8 minutes on the clock now. Before we go ahead and see this Falcon 9 launch from Space Launch Complex 40, let's take a beat to talk about the path it's going to take once it leaves the pad. Talking a little trajectory, shall we? Once it heads off from Slick 40 there at the Cape, the Falcon 9 on this flight will take a northeasterly spin up the coast. So for those of you in the northeast part of Florida, along with, of course, Georgia, the Carolinas, and on up, if you have a clear view of the sky, you may have a nice view of the Falcon 9 rocket as it makes its ascent. If you are able to snag a photo or video of the rocket as it flies away, be sure to tag us on social media. We are most places simply at Spaceflight now. Following stage separation, the first stage booster will target a landing on the drone ship. Just read the instructions positioned out there in the Atlantic. If all goes well with this booster landing, That would mark the 131st good landing on Just Read the Instructions and the 485th booster landing to date. SpaceX is working to certify its first stage boosters for up to 40 flights. It is concerned not only with recovering the booster, but also the payload fairings, which it also wants to certify up to that 40 flight number. Following their re-entry through the atmosphere, they'll make their final splashdown under the support of steerable parachutes, as seen in this picture. Once down in the water, they'll be brought aboard one of SpaceX's recovery vessels, brought back through Port Canaveral, and then onto the Hangar X site here at the Kennedy Space Center, adjacent to where SpaceX has been quite busily working on building their new Gigabay. A lot of concrete has been poured over the last several days in preparation for that massive structure. It'll be quite large and will change the landscape of the Kennedy Space Center. So interested to see what it looks like from a distance across the Banana River, certainly. Five minutes on the clock now.
Falcon 9 tanks are pressing for strong back recheck.
And as you just heard, we are now getting SpaceX mission audio alongside pad level views of the Falcon 9 rocket. As fueling continues, the vapor from the liquid oxygen forming a nice little fog bank there along Slick 40. 4.5 minutes remaining on the clock.
Lower has started.
With that call, first we'll see the clamp arms just beneath those payload fairings open up, and then the transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the strong back, will recline away from the Falcon 9 rocket and stay in that position until liftoff. There you can see those clamp arms now opening up. Right about at the 3-minute mark, we'll hear the call for stage 1 liquid oxygen load being complete. That'll be one of the last big fueling milestones.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
And with that good call, we're awaiting a similar call out regarding the second stage, at which point the Falcon 9 will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. Expecting that at about T-minus 2 minutes.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
With that, the rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. Now starting to see the ground gas closeouts there. SpaceX releases the remaining liquid oxygen from the feed lines.
Ground gas closeouts.
With that good call, we're coming up on the final minute ahead of the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
With that, we are just waiting for the SpaceX launch director now to give their call that they are go for launch.
Launch director, go for launch.
And with that good confirmation, we are now approaching 30 seconds ahead of liftoff. 28 more Starlink V2 mini satellites getting ready to head up into low Earth orbit. "15 seconds. And here we go. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 10-30 mission. Falcon 9 has cleared the towers.
Falcon 9 power and concentrator nominal.
Falcon 9 supersonic.
A little more than a minute into this mission. Rocket passing through max Q. The greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle, now throttling up. Getting ready to thermally condition the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage.
MVAC chill.
Good call there. Coming up on a few events now in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, at about T plus 2 minutes and 25 seconds, followed by stage separation, and then the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine. Payload fairings will be jettisoned just before the 3-minute mark. About 10 seconds to MECO. MECO. Stage separation.
Main engine
Seconds.
cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
All good callouts, good visuals. Should be seeing fairing jettison momentarily. There they go.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Now a little more than 3.5 minutes into the mission. Coming up, the next milestone will be the first stage entry burn, calling upon 3 out of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon booster. That'll slow the vehicle down dramatically. A little more than 4.5 minutes into the mission so far. Everything appears to be progressing nominally. We're less than a minute from the start of the entry burn, which, given the darkness, we might be able to see with our tracking cameras, but we'll see how well the clouds do or do not cooperate with that. Coming up on the start of that entry burn.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
And there we go. Pete's got that entry burn. Well done, Pete.
Stage 1 entry burn startup. Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
With the conclusion of the entry burn, that sets the stage for the landing burn. Too far out and too low to the horizon for our tracking cameras to see. We're going to go ahead and rely on the SpaceX onboard cameras. Landing burn will begin at just about the 8-minute mark in flight. Once again, SpaceX is targeting a touchdown on the drone ship called Just Read the Instructions today. Said to be the 131st good landing on that particular vessel.
Stage 1 transonic.
Booster traveling below the speed of sound was that call you just heard.
Stage 2 internal guidance.
Stage 1 landing burn. Landing leg deploy.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And a good touchdown for a B-1080, wrapping up its 21st trip to space and back.
Nominal orbit insertion.
With a good call for a nominal orbit insertion for the rocket's upper stage, it will coast now until about T plus 54 minutes and 49 seconds. There will be a brief 2-second burn on that upper stage engine, allowing those Starlink satellites right there to be deployed at T plus 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 11 seconds post liftoff. And with a good start to this mission so far, we're going to go ahead and get those launch replays geared up and ready for you. As that's in work, I want to thank a few folks for your support in the live chat today. Our thanks to White Rice 757 for a $10 super chat. Thank you for that. Really appreciate the support. Also, thanks to Jim Stewart for a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, Jim. Really appreciate the support at that level. Same to Andy Cochran for a $30 super chat. Thank you, Andy, who says, "Go Falcon, go SpaceX." Also want to thank Jeffrey Engel for a very generous $50 super chat. Thank you so much for your support tonight, Jeffrey. And as we're getting those replays for you, let's go ahead and take a moment to talk about the mission stats now as they currently stand. With a good liftoff and landing of the Falcon 9 first stage booster, tail number B1080, that marked its 21st flight completed. This was SpaceX's 513th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 96th of the year so far. This was SpaceX's 450th Falcon booster reflight, the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This is the company's 156th orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 270th from Pad 40 for SpaceX, and the 325th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. Here's where the bar chart now currently stands. You can see 2025 now tied with the final number of 2023. And of course, we are just sitting on August 4th, so plenty more real estate to go for SpaceX. The company had a stated goal of reaching 170 launches before year's end. We'll have to wait and see how that all shakes out by the time we get to December 31st. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 131st good landing on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. That marked the 393rd drone ship landing for SpaceX and the 485th overall booster landing. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 66th orbital launch from Florida, the 101st from U.S. soil, 111th from U.S. Rocket Company, and the 170th orbital launch attempt around the world. There have been 4 orbital launch failures so far this year. Here's where our pie chart now currently stands, and it looks like we're ready to start rolling those launch replays for you. Let's go ahead and get things started with the fixed view from the press site from our Adam Bernstein. Moving on to the wide camera view. Now to the turn basin. Now on to Pete Carson's tracker. Moving on to Pete's wide tracker. Moving on to checking Jen's view from Merritt Island. And finally wrapping up with our Adam Bernstein's tracker here at the press site. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up with our live coverage of the Starlink 10-30 mission. Touch and go there for a while with the weather, but when all was said and done, SpaceX managed to hit it at the buzzer at the very tail end of their launch window. Coming up next for the company will be not a batch of their own Starlink satellites, but a batch of Amazon's Kuiper satellites. Kuiper Falcon number 2 coming up on August 7th with a window that opens up at 10:01 p.m. Eastern, sending another 24 of those satellites into low Earth orbit. If you haven't already, now is a great time to hit that subscribe button on your way out the digital door. Be sure to turn on notifications so that you don't miss when we start our next live launch coverage or post new videos here on the YouTube channel. I want to give a big thank you to our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images, along with Pete Carstens, for staying up late, helping to track the Falcon 9 rocket. I also want to thank our photography team of Adam and John for some long, hard work today, making sure that everything was right and ready for today's launch amid quite a bit of less than ideal weather. Also want to thank our moderators in the live chat, Mark Otto, Jeff Hansen, and Rick Donner for helping us out today, keeping things kosher in the chat. Also, thanks to channel member Kemils Granados for helping to answer folks' questions. Thanks as well to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast today. Most importantly, though, thanks to you for wherever you've been watching from. Certainly appreciate you either getting up early or staying up late to watch along with us as we cover this mission, and we look forward to welcoming you back in again when next we have our upcoming live streams. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, And we will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.